Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is rein, and this verb was suggested by the viewer Irene. Irene, thank you so much for your patience, and let's take a look now at how to use this verb. The first way you might encounter this verb would be in connection to horseback riding. So when you either sort of check or guide a horse by pulling on its reins. And you can see from this definition already, we're going to have a noun form of this word. And to better help us understand it, I've got a little picture here and a nice little arrow, right? So these leather straps are the rein. So that's how we're either checking or guiding an animal by. But a more common way that you'll encounter this verb now can mean to keep something under control or to restrain it. So kind of to prevent something from running wild, right? That's why we have those leather straps to sort of control the horse. So there's that connection to the second definition. For now, you should know that rein is a regular verb. If you want to make the progressive form of this verb, all you need to do is add ing, and that forms raining. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. The base verb, rain, ends in a voiced N sound. This means our ed ending is just going to make a d or d sound. So I'm not going to add an extra syllable when I say it. The past tense and the participle form of our verb should sound like this: rained, rained. Okay. Now we do have some phrasal verbs to look at and some more example sentences. So let's move to talking about the phrasal verb to rain back on. So when people use this phrasal verb, what they're talking about is their attempt or their trying to restrict something to get it under control. So you might think of something has been going a little wild or crazy, and now they're trying to get it under control. So an example of this might be, how can we rein back on our monthly spending? So some people, as they kind of look at their personal finances, think, I'm spending way too much money. I need to restrict or get that under control. Another phrasal verb you are very likely to see or hear is to rein in. This can have a couple different meanings. It goes back to our original definitions of the verb. So the first way to use rein in means to make an animal stop by using those leather straps. An example of this might be, she reined in the horse just before they reached the embankment. Right? So made that horse stop before maybe it ran into a difficult or dangerous place. A second way to use rein in, again, means to limit or control either someone or something. An example of this, please rein in your children before they break something. So maybe you can imagine some kind of just joyful, active children, right? In maybe a store where there are many breakable things, very valuable items, right? And so we want those kids under control. Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to rein up. Again, this goes back to our horseback riding. So this is where we're going to kind of pull back and come to a stop on a horse. So an example of that, the bandits reined up their horses outside the bank. So that example might come from like an old Western movie or Western story. Now let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today we'll practice the past progressive and the present progressive. Now, both of these first verb tenses also get known as the continuous, and that's just fine. Progressive, continuous, they mean exactly the same thing. We'll start with the past progressive today, and what we're going to do with this verb tense is describe an action that was ongoing or that was continuing during a period in the past. And the reason I like saying past progressive with my students is that the two P's can help you remember you're going to need two parts to your verb. We'll be using the past form of be, and there are two forms of that, or two words that encompass that, and then our ing form of the verb. So we're going to have to pay attention to our subject in the past progressive. If our subject is I, he, she, or it, we'll use was, and then that ing form of the verb. But if your subject is you, we, or they, then you want to use were, W-E-R-E, and then the ing form of the verb. Let's take a look at an affirmative example. I was reining in my Facebook and limiting my contact with people on that platform when you first wrote me. So here someone maybe is describing that action of like, I'm pulling back, I'm limiting the amount of social media. So someone might use a sentence like this to explain why they hadn't responded to a message in a timely manner. Now, if you want to make negative past progressive sentences, again, we pay attention to our subject, we use the form of be that matches, then not, and then the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. His direct boss wasn't reining in his outlandish behavior. So again, this maybe really obnoxious, possibly rude, or just downright crazy behavior is not being kept under control. Now, let's take a look at making a yes or no question in the past progressive. To do this, again, we'll start with our form of be, the past tense form, so was or were. Whatever form matches our subject, that subject comes next. Then we'll use the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Were businesses reining in their spending the past year? So we're looking at that completed time period and looking at how businesses were behaving, or asking that question. Were they limiting? Were they controlling? Maybe even trying to restrain or reduce their spending. Now let's move on and talk about present progressive. In this verb tense, we're either talking about actions that are happening right now or actions that are in progress during a time period that has not yet been completed. Present progressive also has two P's, so again, you're going to need two parts to make your verb. The be verb has three forms in the present. So as a quick review, in the affirmative, if our subject is I, I'll use am, and then the ing form of the verb. If my subject is you, we, or they, I'll use are, A-R-E, and then that ing form of the verb. And if my subject is he, she, or it, I'll use is, and the ing form of the verb. Here's another example. Southwest Airlines is reining in expansion plans after a few difficult quarters. So again, this comes from a headline, a news article. Again, that idea of restraining, controlling something. So maybe they had these big plans. We're going to fly to this city and this city and this city. And they thought about it like, oh, maybe it doesn't make financial sense. So we're going to kind of reduce or scale back those plans. Now, let's talk about making negative present progressive sentences. To do this, again, we pay attention to our subject. We'll use the form of be that matches, so am, are, or is, then not, and then the ing form of the verb. Here's an example of this. Clothing manufacturers aren't reining in emissions significantly. So people talk about what a great impact clothing manufacturers, producers create in terms of emissions and pollution, all of that together, and how that's contributing so much to global warming, that just not enough is being done. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the present progressive. To do this, we'll start with our form of be, whatever form matches our subject, that subject comes next, then use the ing form of the verb. Here's my last example. Is the president reining in Doge? Again, here's a wish of many people. There's a new government department in the United States who's been doing a lot, creating new policies, cutting certain programs, certain departments, firing people. Many people find it to be out of control and they would like our leader to use or restrain that department's actions significantly more than what appears to be happening right now. Now, let's spend a moment looking at some words and some phrases that involve the verb rein. And it won't surprise you, our first word, we've already kind of mentioned here. We've said rein can be a noun. And again, that refers to that long, narrow strap that's generally attached to the end of a horse's bit. And it is usually used in pairs. So you rarely are going to see this noun in the singular use. You'll see it with an S. So it's used in pairs, and it's going to help you maybe guide or direct the horse a particular way, either while riding or driving a large group. So an example, someone might tell you if you're taking a riding lesson, pull the reins just a bit. Right, so maybe they're asking kind of a light, slow, soft touch to it in that example. Now, something else you might encounter is the phrase free rein. If you hear someone use that, what they're talking about is someone or maybe a group having complete freedom, right? So kind of imagine like a horse without its reins, right? It can run wherever it wants to. It's not under control. So free rein is freedom to do whatever you want or choose. So maybe you'll have a supervisor say something along the lines of, you have free rein on this project, right? Do it the way you want. You can have the resources you need and approach it from whatever standpoint you feel is appropriate. Now, we'll look at another phrase that's kind of the opposite. To keep a tight rein on means someone is keeping rather strict or tight control, either over someone or something. So here there's not going to be that independence or autonomy, right? There's going to, you might think of micromanaging, right? Keeping really strict control on something. So an example of this in a sentence might be, they really keep a tight rein on their kids. They aren't allowed to have smartphones or use screens much. So you might hear this used in parenting, again, in supervising. Sometimes even teachers are told or described as having a tight rein on their students. So again, that generally implies kind of a strictness. Again, I want to say a special thanks to Rein for today's suggestion, and I thank you all for watching. Have a great day.